All right, welcome back to another AUA episode of the podcast. We have a very special guest today, Nick Kroll, who's here for the new movie Adult Beginners.
Hi.
It's very awesome to have you on.
Yeah. It's very exciting to be
here.
here.
You were one of the first people that I saw when I came out here and saw live comedy at Upright Citizens Brigade. You did Fabrice.
Oh,
wow. And that was one of the first things I went to when I was going there to see if I wanted to do the school there or not. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Did you end up doing the school there?
I did.
Okay.
I dropped out after 2 times.
Yeah.
The Improv 201 I think was the last one that I
Yeah.
did just because it got a little expensive. But
sure.
I was like, I got enough out of this.
Well, as long as I was able to sort of coax you into doing 2 classes, then my job is done.
Yeah, exactly.
I did through level 3 in New York many years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad to hear. UCB is the best. It was where I started doing it in New York and then moved out here just as the theater in LA was opening. So.
But now they got a new one, right?
They have a new one on Sunset, yeah, and it's there also where they do all the classes, and there's a couple stages, and it's great. It's an awesome place.
Yeah. Well, thank you for getting me started on that one. I first moved out here.
And here we are now.
I know.
An inspiration. So, if you don't know who Nick Kroll is, where would they maybe have seen your face?
Come on, guys, you know who I am. If you're listening to this podcast or watching, you have some idea who I am, right? Right?
Maybe just clicking through the channels.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can do that on.
I don't know. Can you do that? I'm on a show called The League on FX with a number of funny people about fantasy football. And I had a show on Comedy Central for 3 seasons called Kroll Show, which is a sketch
that just ended,
hybrid.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. What was the because you kind of chose to end that on your own? Was that kind of just because you had seen a clear ending to it, or
I wanted to free up more time for podcasts that are videotaped.
Yes.
And I felt like
God.
this was and it's working out great.
Yeah. So far.
How did it work? We just it felt like we had sort of told all the stories that I wanted to tell. In that, it sounds sort of cheesy. It's like when you talk to an actor and they're like, "I'm a storyteller." But in this case, it genuinely felt like we had created this world. In a weird way, I equate it somewhat to a herald, which is the classic improv technique, which is a basic story structure, which is you set up in the first act all these different worlds and characters. In the second act, you start to see them begin to get heightened and integrated, and then in the third act, hopefully, all of those things begin to cross over and create one more fluid narrative. And it kind of felt like, not on purpose, that's what we got to with the 3rd season. And I felt like this is the best work we've done. Why don't we just end it now, feeling like we've heightened everything to their natural conclusion and get out while people, still really are psyched about the show.
Yeah.
So, did you start Kroll Show intending for that much crossover to be happening by season 3?
No. That it started. We knew that we wanted to bring a lot of these worlds back in as shows, Rich Dicks or Publicity or Oh Hello, all those things. We knew that we wanted to keep telling those stories, but it was really, and then we started to integrate characters from different worlds into the same, into a sketch or a scenario, and season 2 we did that a little more, and then it was really the end of season 2, John Levinstein, who was the showrunner and executive producer, pitched of basically an entirely narrative storyline from beginning to end, following this character Cesar, who was a toilet baby from Alhambra, who had a dad academy. It was his learning how to become a dad, and he was having a child with Pretty Liz from Publicity, played by Jenny Slate. And John pitched the idea of maybe it's Cesar's at Dad Academy, then he goes to a party, that could be a Rich Dicks party, and then we run into Niece to Niece, who's another character that Jenny Slate was playing, who we hadn't seen since the first episode of season 2, and then they go back, and all of these worlds collided in one narrative structure. And then season 3, we started to really play more and more with that, so that episodes either felt entirely integrated or that there were some things that were tying together. And we really just started to also combine, it'd be fun to see, Ruth Diamond Phillips, a Jenny Slate's Marcia Clark character with Ref Jeff, who's my lonely referee character, or my lonely referee character. Anyway, so we just started to really play more and more with that, and once you establish a group of characters, it's just fun to see them start to play with each other and create a more fully constructed universe.
So I'm assuming your costume changes got a lot more complicated once those crossovers started happening. You'd be playing like 3 or 4 roles in one sort of setup.
Yeah, generally speaking, we were shooting one character per day or something like that. Sometimes it was 2. But it got makeup, in production, there was constantly trying to figure out, all right, we're at this location, we're playing this guy, and I also need to play this guy. This guy takes 2 hours to get ready. This guy I can slap a wig on, and so let's shoot him out at the end of the day. I mean, there are those logistics always to figure out.
Which one takes 2 hours?
Well, for a long time, Dr. Armand took a long time because he had a bald spot. And because he had a bald spot, you had to put a bald cap on and then put hair on top of the bald spot. But because I always wanted him to look like he had plugs. Yeah. So then by the end of season, you'll see if you watch by the end of season 3, he's wearing a lot of hats.
Just at the same time.
I just was like, I'm done coming in an hour and a half early to have a bald spot that you never see.
It's a creative decision that you didn't think of all the consequences of.
Yeah.
Everyone out there is learning about all this insider movie magic now, TV magic.
Lifting the curtain right up.
Cutting corners left and right.
Always.
So let's talk about Adult Beginners.
Yes.
You wrote the story, and it got developed into the screenplay and star in it. What was the process like getting the story picked up by...
Well, I had the idea. I have 12 nieces and nephews. The story of the movie is that it's a sort of a douchey entrepreneur from New York. The bottom falls out of his world. He loses his relationship, all of his friends, his business, all of his money. And the only place he can turn is his sister and her husband and their 3-year-old son. He moves in with them in the suburbs, and to pay his way becomes their kid's nanny. And that came from, I have 12 nieces and nephews. I feel wholly incapable of taking care of them. So it'd be like, what would it be like for the selfish younger brother to have to eventually take care of the kid? So I had that idea. I brought that to Mark Duplass, my co-star on the League, who, with his brother Jay, has created an empire of indie filmmaking. Puffy Chair on through Dodecathlon, Hump Day, My Sister's Sister. He starred in and was one of the producers on. I can't believe I'm forgetting Jake Johnson and Aubrey Plaza movie. Safety Not Guaranteed. As well as Cyrus and Jeff Who Lives at Home. I mean, they've just made movies from everything from $50,000 to $5-10 million, and he just knows that space so well. So I brought it to him. He really liked the idea and helped me start to put together. We just sort of, and from that point on, mentored me through the process of getting a movie made. And then found some writers in New York, a couple, Liz Flahav and Jeff Cox, who had a young child at the time, and right before we got into production had another kid, so they were perfectly situated to play the character, to write to these young parent characters that we envisioned, and then put the script together, and then found Rose Byrne, and I sat down with her, and she really responded to the script. She also is the youngest of 4, so understood that sort of sibling dynamic that we were trying to capture. And
we got to see it recently, and it was her character. She plays it so well.
Yeah,
killed it that role.
She's awesome. I mean, she was the first person we went to play my sister, because she both has the dramatic chops, as you would see in Damages, but also is really funny. From Bridesmaids to Neighbors to, the first time I met her was we were doing a Q&A. I had a very, very small part in Get Him to the Greek. She had a bigger part. She played Russell Brand's girlfriend. And I was just like, God, this woman's really funny and she can act. And so she just felt perfectly situated. And I think she responded to, I don't think there are a ton of parts for women that are, I hope, as grounded and complex as we tried to make her character.
Yeah, she was very. She had motivations.
Yeah,
weren't
kind of gave up her dreams, the life that she was pursuing.
Yeah, and she's flawed, and she's a liar, and she's it's not like the nagging older sister or the perfect wife or.
But her moral compass seems to be somewhat
better.
Yeah.
Yes. But it was, so I think she, we were just very lucky that she responded to it. when we sat down to talk about the part, she was like, I really like this, and we were talking about it, and then she was like, and I don't want this to be weird, but the part of my husband really reminds me of my boyfriend. I said, who's your boyfriend? She said, Bobby Cannavale.
Oh, they're actually a couple?
Yeah, and I was like, well, ironically, we wrote the part at the time named Bobby for Bobby Cannavale, which was crazy because Liz Flahive, one of the writers, had written for him on Nurse Jackie, is an executive producer and a playwright, and I knew Bobby socially, and so it just happened. She's like, is it all right if I put you guys in touch? And I was like, yeah, because literally once we had locked her in, we were going to go to Bobby.
Yeah.
And so it just worked out. It worked out. So we had them attached. Then I went through the process of finding a director, and I was introduced through a friend to Ross Katz, who directed the movie, who was a producer originally, had produced In the Bedroom and Lost in Translation, and had directed a Kevin Bacon HBO movie that had won some Golden Globes called Taking Chance, which is a very serious movie about a Marine Kevin Bacon, who returns a fallen Marine's body to his hometown to be buried. Not funny.
No, it doesn't sound funny.
And Bobby watched the movie and called me. He's like, yeah, I watched the movie. He's like, the movie's fucking hilarious. And I was like, I know. But Ross talked to Mark and I and had a great take on the movie, understood the story, and we had talked like, well, I'll be able to, and I talked to Rose and Bobby. I was like, he hasn't done a lot of comedy, but he's a funny guy, and I'll be monitoring the comedy levels.
I would imagine it would be harder to go more towards getting a comedic director to do drama than having at least grounded in drama and letting the actors and writers kind of let the comedy happen.
Yeah, and our the goal with this was to make something that was equally funny and dramatic. And I think it's pretty well balanced, or that was the goal, was to make something that, because then we padded the movie with, Mantzoukas. Jason Mantzoukas plays another arrival Manny. Joel McHale plays my rich dick best friend in the city. Bobby Moynihan plays an old friend of mine, or a guy I knew from high school. Mike Birbiglia has a tiny part up top as in one of the original investors. Julie White, who I met doing Cavemen, who's a really talented actress, plays Rose Byrne's boss. Jane Krakowski from 30 Rock plays the swimming instructor. So we kind of knew that as long as we built a strong, believable, realistic, dramatic story, that we could then pad everything with funny performances and guest stars, as well as knowing that Rose and Bobby and hopefully myself could handle the comedic elements within dramatic scenes.
So how long was that process from hatching the idea to actually getting it made?
I walked into Mark's trailer, pitched him the movie. It was basically to when we sold it at Toronto. The Toronto Film Festival was basically 3 years to the day. Oh. And now Toronto was in October or something like that. So now it's now basically 3.5 years from when I brought it to Mark to it coming out.
But at least you were on set with him pretty regularly. Harassed him about the progress.
Yes. Yeah, and it was super helpful because he just at every stage he'd been through every stage of this, from giving notes on the script to casting it to securing the financing to being in pre-production to shooting it to then selling it to dealing with the studio, and every step he had really helpful insight to me.
And you guys also premiered it at South by Southwest this year, right? What was the reaction like there? It
was great. It was really fun. Both festivals were really fun. I mean, it's like, again, you work on something for so long in a bubble. And then I had one screening of it. They did 1 or 2 screenings in New York for friends and family. I did one out here of a very rough cut for all of my friends, which was super nerve-wracking to get notes. I've got notes from my friends before, but it was it was temp music. But we found a few things that were like, oh, this is not clear. We can work on this and this and this, and I think it made the movie better. But to watch it fully finished, edited, color-corrected, sound, everything with an audience who was unfamiliar with it, was really exciting and really gratifying, and to hear like gasps and laughs where you didn't know there was a laugh, things like that were really cool. And South by is a super fun festival, and Austin's a fun town.
Let's get into some questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Start off with J for Jade asks, well, it's a two-parter.
Yeah.
Let's start with the first part. What do you believe was your first breakout role or moment?
I was looking at the second half. I'll start. It's weird. Like, I don't know how you guys feel, but it feels to me like there are very few like actual breakout moments. There's a steady, at least in my case, it's been a steady progression of like doing this next level of things. So like I was on Cavemen, which was not the most successful show of all time, but it was a breakthrough in that I got to.
It was on network TV.
A network television show that brought me out to LA, got me. I'd been on like Best Week Ever and acted in commercials, but I'd never actually acted on a television show. So that was a big moment, but it also like didn't catapult me into superstardom. Yeah. But also like this movie is like, I get to be in a movie from beginning to end and get to, be on, podcast shows like this. So I think I just feel like it's very rarely do people have that breakout moment. Mm-hmm. Really, it's a steady progression of jobs and moments and relationships that help you achieve the next level of success.
I think specifically with the League, it's such a widely accepted great show, but also has a very hardcore cult following. Mm-hmm. That I feel like that was the first time where I was like, this is going to go on forever. It's such a great show, and
I'd say the League was definitely a help in making me people beyond like just pure comedy people knowing about me. For sure. And then you could argue Kroll Show then allowed me to become more of an individual and break out of just being people knowing me as Ruxin. Mm-hmm. But it's like like my feeling is like you gotta hope God willing you have a career that's like long, that you're just like, you got to fill 40 years of a career.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you're just like, there are going to be ups and downs and things that people like and people don't like, and you just like, hopefully you get to do stuff that you enjoy and that people see it and enjoy it. But
the fact that having a show on the biggest comedy network in the country that has just your name in the title has to be some kind of thing in your career where you can look back and be like, look at that touchstone.
Yeah. So many fonts.
Yeah.
So many fonts. That was and is pretty cool. It's all, but it's like, but I would say like whether it was my name or not, it's like, I got to put together a show with my friends
and your characters
and my characters and that definitely felt like, and it felt like, but like. Until this season, I was like, people kind of like the show, but like until the third season, it felt like people were really started to feel it that third season, and that's when it starts to feel like, I accomplished something. Mm-hmm. Like I don't know how you guys feel, but it feels like you're constantly like, everyone's gonna figure out I'm a fraud. And
that's the greatest fear of anyone that's like making something.
Yeah.
Anytime we have actors and comedians in for our video podcast, and I was like, they're gonna be like, they just give you guys this job to sit and talk to us. Like, when's someone gonna find you out?
Oh yeah, especially with comedians like you. Like you're on Comedy Bang Bang pretty often.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I love that show, but everyone on that is a fucking genius with like improv and conversation and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm not Scott Aukerman.
Right.
So, shit like this is like, he's gonna think this is bullshit.
No, it's, I can't stand Scott Aukerman. I can't stand Comedy Bang Bang. Show can suck a dick.
Yeah.
Guy can go fuck himself.
Wow. You heard it here.
You heard it here
I'm
first.
glad that we have that sound clip now forever and ever. So to get on to the second part of the question, Fabrice and Bobby Bottle Service are two of your most iconic characters. How do you develop characters like these, and what makes them stick? Are there any routines you do to get into character?
I think that those two characters are. Well, I do think that in developing those characters, those were developed largely live on stage. And as my show progressed, I had less opportunity to develop characters like that on stage. And podcasts, in a way, started to fill that void of not being able to get on stage to workshop stuff and being like, oh, like I did Fabrice and people responded to X, Y, and Z. I mean, I had been doing Fabrice for a while, but those things were doing stuff like Comedy Bang Bang or other similar kinds of shows allowed me to sort of workshop things to get them ready to feel like they were ready to be on TV.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of characters kind of, at least not debuted, but at least worked out on Comedy Bang Bang that are on Kroll Show. So.
Yeah. And then, there are certain phrases that I use sometimes to get into specific characters and voices. Like I've heard that people do that as well for other kinds of things. But I'm trying to think of like for Bobby, I would I'd be like, oh, very cool. Like that was like my way into Bobby.
Yeah.
For like Pennsylvania, which was difficult, was a Pennsylvania, a Philly guy, which is an accent that I really had to learn.
Yeah, it's a weird accent.
It's a super weird accent, and we had a bunch of writers from the Philly area to sort of coach me through it. And I'd be like, go ahead, home run, and I'd be like, okay, that'll help. That, so you try to find those. I would definitely try to find those vocal
specific words that have that very specific Philly dialect to it.
It's not a Kroll Show character, but when you do El Chupacabra, that voice is like spot on, perfect Mexican sort of radio guy. Like how do you learn how to do that?
That evolved. That evolved. Originally, I was doing like an Argentine stand-up character, and that then I started. It felt like a lot of people do like the bad stand-up, from a which is it's always fun. But I was like, okay, I feel like that now. I feel like I've seen enough people do that bad stand-up of one type or another that it was time to change it. And then I moved out here. And I was in my car a lot, and I would end up listening to Latin radio, and you just listen to like El Piolín or El Cucuy, and you just hear any of it, and it starts to, but also realizing like, oh, in New York, there was a lot of those radio stations as well, like La Mega or whatever it was. You realize like, oh, I've been listening to this kind of guy, and then once I'm like, oh, what if he's one of those radio hosts? Then I start to listen to it more carefully and see what they're doing and being like, on those shows then it's like there's like 6 of them doing different levels of voices, and I was like, I think I could probably just do that myself and play with the different voices and create that character and that world.
Next one comes from Streaks. What is it like working on a show like The League with an improvised script?
It's super fun. It's like, luckily in that show we've got basically everyone on that show is a writer. Mark and Katie Duplass, Mark's wife, who plays Jenny on the show, are both writers and obviously directors and producers. Paul Scheer is an improviser who I've known and worked with for many, many years, who's also written a bunch of stuff. Jason Mantzoukas, who plays Rafi, also obviously an improviser and writer, and Steve Ranazizi was a stand-up. John LaJoie did stand-up and written all of his own songs. So you had a bunch of writers working together. And then you have Jeff Schaefer and Jackie, his wife, and they created the show. Jeff had come from Seinfeld and then Curb Your Enthusiasm. So Jeff really understood the structure of putting that kind of show together, had the advantage of having worked on Curb to see like what the scenarios were that worked. So it's super fun. I mean, it's like, I'm not very good at memorizing lines, so it's a great relief to not have to memorize lines.
Yeah.
And even when you do have, and we had plenty of stuff that's scripted on that show. It's not like every line we ever said, but there was always room. What's fun is like, all right, we got the joke that either you wanted us to say, or we got the joke that we figured out in an improvised moment, and now we've got to clean on all 3 cameras. Now let's just try alts, and then you just keep getting to try new stuff. And
was it different kind of segueing into the movie role where you had to have the script mostly memorized and execute on it?
It was intimidating to go make a movie, especially with Bobby and Rose, who are both really good actors and both, Bobby with a ton of stage experience in theater and really having, and Rose having coming off like Damages, where it's a dramatic show where you're, learning 10 pages of dialogue a day. So it was intimidating for me to just exercise some more dramatic acting, but also, having to worry about like learning lines and making sure that I was hitting moments, because the script that Liz and Jeff wrote and that we had been working with for a long time deserved to be, properly said,
done correctly.
And so I tried to treat it like a play, being like, no, this is being written in this way, in this weird, because sometimes you read a line and be like, this is really weird, but then you're like, no, it's really beautifully written. Mm-hmm. That said, we also then improvised. There are moments in almost every scene where there's a few moments that are improvised, just grabbing an extra moment, I hope to take what I learned on the more dramatic acting side from that and apply it to even the improvised stuff I do. And I think we were able to take the skills that I had learned on the League and Kroll Show and improvising. The hardest thing and the most useful thing to do to learn when you're doing an improvised show or any kind of show where you're getting to improvise is being able to improvise on story.
Yeah.
Because you could have people making the funniest improvised joke, but if it doesn't serve the story of the scene, then it's useless and it's going to get thrown away.
Yeah.
Or improvising stuff that sounds like when you watch it seems improvised. Do you know what I mean? I learned it from Jonathan Kreisel, who directed seasons 1 and 2 of Kroll Show, who had directed Portlandia and Tim and Eric and now Men Seeking Woman, is that he'd be like, that sounds improvised. And I'd be like, oh, like, you don't want it to feel like, oh, look at them just fucking around. You want to you want that, especially on the League, you want it to seem like a group of buddies who are fucking around.
Yeah.
Because that's how buddies, but you want it to not feel like, oh, they just fell in love with this riff that they had. And, each project demands a different something.
So did you start off in theater or stand-up or sketch? Like what?
I started doing improv in college. Mike Birbiglia cast me in a sketch show my freshman year. We went to college, Georgetown, together. Oh, okay. He's a very, very successful stand-up and filmmaker, and then I kept doing improv throughout college. Met a group of folks who I still work with, and then I moved to New York and started taking classes at UCB, and then doing stand-up, and then started doing characters and stand-up, and just started kind of doing everything.
So improv, stand-up. Acting, and then writing.
Always trying to create my own content. That I'd say is the through line. So doing improv shows and then hosting like a cappella fest where we would write bits, and then moving to New York and doing stand up and continuing to do improv, and then starting to make like short films, and then getting like Comedy Central or Super Deluxe, this Turner thing that they did years ago, that where I made something with the Sklar brothers, like a little web series, and then getting on Best Week Ever, and then making more shorts and starting to make shorts for Bobby Bottle Service and Fabrice and then Rich Dicks, and then doing more with Bobby, and then eventually getting to the show.
So it seems like you kind of like have done specific things within the space to like almost master them one by one now. Just coming off of the like improv and stand-up, then actually improvising on for a show, and then learning script and stuff like that. Is there something that is like a next step for you and you'd like to learn in the space?
I think the movie is my first foray into like slightly more dramatic stuff, straight acting. Which I really enjoy. I fucking love doing comedy. I don't have any plan to ever stop doing it. But that was, doing the movie was an opportunity for me to show people, hopefully, that I could act and that I could be someone who could be in a movie that isn't just a comedy.
It's funny, while I was watching it, this stupid thought kept popping into my head. I was like, oh, Nick Kroll can actually act. And then I'd step back for a second and be like, he's been acting this whole fucking time.
Yeah.
Just not as a sad little man who has to watch a baby all day.
Yeah, no, and sometimes you have to, and I think it's been that way throughout my career, is like, you kind of have to show people what you can do for people to let you do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, like, it's been very, very nice, people being like, oh, Nick Kroll can act, and I'm like, Yeah, no fucking shit.
You just finally got the chance to actually show it to me.
Yeah, and I would argue, like, if you watch Kroll Show, there's, like, some very dramatic stuff going on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, like, encased in, like a guy who's got, like, an infected lip ring, but, like, Caesar is, like, I'm acting as real as I can as Caesar. Mm-hmm. It happens to be, like, a guy who's a toilet baby.
And as Canadian as possible in wheels.
Yeah, are you Canadian?
No. Do I sound Canadian?
Occasionally.
Yeah. Oh no. No, I'm from
compliment.
I'm from here.
Yeah.
You from LA?
Well, Orange County.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Orange County is the Canada.
Orange County.
Orange County is the Canada of Southern California.
It kind of is.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying this episode with Nick Kroll, but we do have an ad for you this week.
Yeah, this Ask Us Anything is brought to you by DraftKings.com, the official daily fantasy partner of Major League Baseball. And that means no season-long commitments, just instant cash. It's a new way to play fantasy baseball.
Yeah, at DraftKings, it's like a brand new season every time you play. So hurry to DraftKings.com now and enter promo code INSIDE to play for free. You could win part of the $300 million in prizes being awarded this season. Again, use promo code INSIDE for free entry now at DraftKings.com. DraftKings.com, that's DraftKings.com.
Now back to the show. So let's go on to the next question. Florida Goth says, Too Much Tuna is my favorite series in the show. Are there any specific influences that help shape those characters or
I love that
the
guy's
prank
username, first of
itself?
all.
I mean,
Florida Goth.
this is the great joy for me of Kroll Show is that Mulaney and I started doing the Oh Hello guys like almost 10 years ago in New York. John and I also went to college together. We went to Georgetown. He was a freshman, I was a senior, and he moved to New York. We started doing stand-up. He was doing stand-up, and we both started doing those characters together. And we tried to get into like the Aspen Comedy Festival, which is no longer, and for good reason, because they were like, it's too New York. Oh Hello is too New York.
What?
It's too specific.
For Aspen?
Yeah, it's too. Yeah, I know. But they were like, it's too inside. So if you then told me that, however many years later, that a guy with a username Florida Goth would be like, my favorite thing on your show is Too Much Tuna, is like, to me, a perfect distillation of
Validation.
a validation of it. It's like a Florida Goth.
Yeah.
You couldn't have two things that are more different than Oh Hello.
More not like into the New York.
More not into like Upper West Side New York monsters. So, so we've been doing those characters for a long time. Let's see. The question is there any specific influences? Yeah, I mean like Woody Allen movies.
Yeah.
Obviously, we would just watch those guys. I mean, they're all over New York. Woody Allen movies were obviously an influence, both aesthetically. If you look at like the both in the Oh Hello, the way Oh Hello is written is like a Woody Allen title card.
The music.
The music is like of that sort of Gershwin-y jazz. But then the Too Much Tuna is on their like public access show.
Yeah.
So the cable access look of New York cable access is the aesthetic influence there.
And what about the prank itself of presenting people with far too much tuna?
Right. That came. You know, we had started to write. We knew we wanted to do Oh Hello, and we were developing more of the like Woody Allen-ish aesthetic storylines from their life. And then in the writer's room one day, I was sort of explaining to the writers that like John and I used to joke about having a talk show called Too Much Tuna. It wasn't exactly a prank show. It was more like, you know, I'm sitting here with David, and then someone would deliver too much, and you'd be like, oh, this is too much tuna. And then we were like, then the room came up with the idea of like, oh, it'd be funny if that was a prank show, that it was too much tuna, and so people, it was something about the term "too much tuna," which really
resonated with people.
Yeah. Rolls off the tongue.
And I do credit it with being a vehicle through which Florida Goth could get into it, and then once you're in, you're kind of in for whatever they do or wherever they go. Because then we even like within that, like in season 2, we started to take the filmic quality of them, like in the Woody Allen space. And then, like, where they're meeting with the doctor about that they've got mercury poisoning or whatever it is, and then they prank her within that, in that aesthetic, and then it becomes then they go on the road. So our goal was always to, whatever character we were doing, was to keep pushing, even though they're still pranking people too much tuna, that every time they're doing it, there's some heightening, there's something that's changing.
Well, that's very much like everything on Kroll Show is clearly like a sort of commentary on like TV a little bit, or at least a reflection of how TV works. And just every reality show, after a certain point, they have to up the ante in some way.
Yeah.
Adding some new gimmick and stuff. So, yeah, every little segment on Kroll Show seems like you were doing that every episode. It adds some sort of new variable to it.
Yeah, and I would say that was less of a parody of reality shows and more doing what happens with, hopefully, with interesting narrative stuff, which is you just have to keep raising the stakes.
Yeah.
And then where it served us to make it like a parody of a reality show, then great, you know. But it is that just goal of telling stories where you keep pressing forward, so you're not seeing the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
So FC Dallas Byrne asks, what's the meanest and nicest thing a person has ever said to you?
I'm just taking a picture of Florida Goff. Send to Mulaney. Sorry, what was? I'm listening as we talk.
The meanest or nicest thing that a person has ever said to you.
And why is it Nick Kroll can actually act by Elliot Newberry?
Well, there's people say stuff online that they would never say to you in person.
Yes.
And for the most part, I mean, what's crazy is that, you know, for every percentage-wise, I'd say like 1 out of 20 comments is negative, or something like that. It might be even, the numbers might even be higher, 1 out of 50 probably. But weirdly, the one is the one that sticks with you. You're like,
Right.
I gotta find out who this guy is.
Yeah.
Not to be like, I'm like, I guess this guy's probably right. I should probably, you know. The thing that annoys me is when people want to compliment you, but they don't want to come across as like a fan, or they don't want to come across, they'll like give you a half compliment or a backwards, you know, backhanded compliment, or like, yeah, you're pretty funny. It's like,
I guess.
yeah, and it's like I'm always just like, feel free to just tell me you think I'm funny.
Yeah.
I will be so much more happy and nice to you than if you say I'm pretty funny.
Yeah.
There's something
just
about
met the bar of what they think is comedy.
it's like just
Acceptable compliment.
Yeah, qualifying it. And I did it the first time I met David Cross was at like a bar, and I was like, I don't like your stuff, like as a joke.
Yeah.
And he knew it was a joke and was very nice about it, but I was like, looking back, I'm like, what a dickhead.
Yeah.
Just tell David Cross that you think he's funny.
Yeah.
And he'll be, you know, nobody ever minds hearing they're funny.
Yeah. Well, that's a good tip for everyone out there that will potentially
If you
meet.
see Nick Kroll or David Cross in person, make
Probably
sure to
also, or just, you know.
Anyone in general.
No, just
Just
those
tell
two.
me like their shit.
Yeah.
If you like it.
You know, you don't have to take pictures.
Yeah, you know,
We don't have to take pictures. You can tell someone we met. That'll
Yeah.
be great.
yeah. All right, Maddie,
Cell phones have
cancel the promo
ruined
picture.
interactions with
Yeah.
celebrities, I think. Like Paul McCartney, I think he refuses to take pictures with people, but he'll be like, I'll sit here and talk to you for 5
Yes.
minutes.
Yeah.
You're like, no, I just kind of want a picture.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is like that's the bummer is when that happens, when you're like, I'm ready to engage you to have a real interesting moment with you, and people are like, yeah, no, I just want proof. You're you're
like,
a concept.
It's like Pokemon.
Yeah. And that can be a little frustrating. That can be a little frustrating because you're like, oh, I mean, the only person I've ever asked to take a picture with was Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
well,
you gotta
I mean,
do that.
Yeah, right.
And I'm sure he loves that.
Yeah.
He was fine with it.
Question from Waste Too Much Time on You. Hey Nick, I've seen you act as a minor character in many good shows. What's the favorite show you casted in as a minor character? For example, you casted in Brooklyn Nine-Nine as Homeland Security just for one episode.
I have been very lucky to be on like almost a bunch of the shows that I think are funny in the sitcom space. Brooklyn Nine-Nine I just got to do, and I know a bunch of the writers there, and Andy and Chelsea and Joel. I know a bunch of that cast, so I was psyched to do that. Doing Parks and Rec was really exciting for me because that was a show that I really responded to and liked, and that was fun. And that set was a great set, and Brooklyn similarly, just a great vibe. And there was a lot of kind of lessons for me in like when I created my show, how I wanted to run a set.
Yeah.
Of being like, oh,
Youth
everybody here is
experience.
sampling. Of different
yeah,
ones.
and like everyone here on Parks, that because I was on that before I had my show, I was like, boy, everybody here is like in a good mood and very nice to each other and respectful and funny, and everyone seems to like enjoy their work and their day. A lot of shows aren't that way, but I've been very lucky. Like I did Community was fun. So they're both the favorite you've been cast in. And I don't know. I got to do a little thing on Kimmy Schmidt, which was fun. I never got to do 30 Rock, which I was bummed about because it's such an iconic, funny show. But doing Kimmy Schmidt was fun.
It's a consolation.
Yeah, it was great to be able to do to be on, because like Tina and Robert's writing is so sharp and funny, and the writers they have there. So again, I've been really a New Girl I got to do, which was also cool. I think that show's really funny and well written. I've been very like fortunate. It's like the fun thing about doing comedy is that it's such a collaborative thing where it's like, oh, can you come and do my show, and I'll get to go do your show, and we're very lucky that we get to do that.
I mean, I always hear that there's like feuds and stuff sort of in the community, but it seems like with the amount that people work together and sort of cross over, it seems like a pretty positive community to be a part of.
Yeah, I think any community in human existence is going to have some feuds and people who don't get along with each other. Mm-hmm. It's just part of human nature. And I think this is a very cool, exciting time to be part of comedy because there are so many venues for people to have gigs and for people to be guests on other people's shows or podcasts. Yeah, it's like, not only like to be, I'll go and do your show, I'll do Comedy Bang Bang, the podcast, and then like you'll come and do my show, or I'll go do the, Comedy Bang Bang show, or people who you don't know, but then they're like, I watch your show, come and do it. It's like, it's such a, and we all need each other to accomplish what we want to do. We just need other funny, talented people to do it.
I actually have a question. I love Life and Times of Tim.
Yeah.
That's a show that fucking everyone I mentioned it to has never heard of it. It's, for some reason, it flew so under the radar. Like, what was sort of the process of making that show, and do people ever actually bring it up?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay.
For those who don't know, it's an animated show on HBO that I did, and it ironically. I booked it right around when I booked Cavemen, right before it. When it was at that point, it was a Fox pilot being produced by Warner Brothers. It ended up eventually on HBO, very loosely scripted, like The League. There were scripts, but we were encouraged to walk away almost immediately, and we would all improvise together in the room together. It was created by this guy Steve Dildarian, who ended up on Kroll Show a bunch as Steve Tim, who was the in Gigolo House, was like the very small, meek guy who didn't look like he belonged.
He did.
Was Steve Dildarian / Tim. And in making Lifetimes of Tim, I met John Levenstein, who was running the writer's room in season 2 of Tim, who then ran Kroll Show. So it became a very useful thing for me as well. And that show is in the vein of, I think, the closest thing right now would be something like Bob's Burgers.
Yeah.
Improvised animated stuff. And the guys who did Bob's Burgers had done home movies before that.
Right.
Which was a similar thing. And so it was so fun to do. It was and I met a lot of people who became friends, or I got to bring in a lot of my friends. Steve had come out of the advertising world, and so I would sort of be like, well, maybe like John Daly, who I think is so funny, could come in and mess around, and we started to fill out his world with people that I knew, and it became a really collaborative community.
He was just Steve Dildarian. So that was like the first thing he'd done. His sort of like his tone of voice and everything on the show.
He's so funny.
So funny.
He's like a meek Ray Romano.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just everything always goes wrong. He's like, oh, geez.
Yeah, and you don't even hear it. You'd watch the show, and then and acting with him now too, you were like, you'd watch and be like, oh, I didn't even know he said that. I was staring at him and I never caught it. And he was just, he's just got a very funny way about him. And he's really a funny guy.
Finer Piner asks, hey Kroll, I am homegrown Canadian. What drawn you to Canada to make the sketch Wheels Ontario?
Perfectly Canadian.
Yeah.
What drawn you to?
There needs to be more thank yous on the end.
Yeah.
Thank you, sorry.
Pardon. Weirdly, that really grew out of, not weirdly, but that grew out of John Daly, who plays Coach Teacher / Gene Creamers, as well as Peter Paparazzo and Wendy Shawn and Murph, Dawn from
He's
Dawn's
like the
Pawns.
biggest collaborator.
Yeah, he and I had done Rich Dicks as a 15-minute pilot for before Kroll Show, and he was a producer and writer and star. He was the only other full cast member on Kroll Show, and just a monster talent. He played hockey growing up, was obsessed with Canada, and Joe Mandy, another writer on the show, writes on Parks and Rec, and performed on our show a little bit, played Ilan Faison, if you remember Gil Faison's stepson. They were both obsessed with Canada, and so we were trying to figure out, and they sort of came up with the idea of like, what about like a Degrassi kind of show? And then Drake had been on Degrassi in a wheelchair and had been named Wheels, so we thought it was like, oh, what if, we sort of we're like, oh, what if we did a Degrassi show where everybody was in a wheelchair except for the one kid who got picked on for it. And then that spun out into like Show Us Your Songs Toronto and all these other Canadian iterations.
You created an entire world of Canadian pop culture that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, and so we created my character Mikey on Wheels Ontario, but played by the actor Brian Lacroix, which is because at the time Joe Mandy was obsessed with LaCroix water, and then LaCroix abandoned him as their unofficial spokesman, and he is now refuses to drink LaCroix.
Yeah. Do you ever get a reaction from people when you obviously tour Canada doing stand-up, or you have?
I've done a few shows there. Canadians love it.
Yeah.
They're so excited to be acknowledged, and they're so excited to not just have it be like, take off, eh? I think Canadians are so used to people being like, hey, hoser, like the sort of base Canadian stuff that
it's not just the big stereotypes, it's all the little stereotypes.
Yeah, and it's weird how many of the details are like Joe or Daly or Gabe Liedman, another writer for the show, would write these scripts, and you'd be like, is that real or is that fake? And they'd be like, no, homo milk is real. What? The homogenized milk, they called it homo milk. And it was in bags. It'd be bags of being candidates and bags of milk.
I've heard that. Yeah.
And it was like all these things that you're like, is that real? And then it was like cafetorium. And I was like, that's a joke. And then someone on the internet wrote to me, he's like, no, we had a cafetorium. And I was like, fuck, all right. But like zip up pocket sack, which is what Gabe named backpacks. Canadians as a zip up pocket sack is not real. But you're like,
it might be now. They might have just taken it and run with it and be like, we gotta talk.
That's all we can ask for.
Yeah, this one's a good one. That's from TA Pod Har 1991. Could you kindly share with us your experience doing the very first stand-up of your life? What was it, and how was the reception of the same? And how was the reception of the audience?
I've told this story a few times, so I won't do the funny version of it.
Okay.
But I the first time I did stand-up was my freshman year of college. It was this thing called the Funniest Act on Campus. And it's ironically where I met Mike Birbiglia. Mike won the competition. He had like a 5-minute stand-up act. I thought I was going to pretend to piss my pants and have a water balloon and pop the water balloon. I thought that would be really funny. Be like, I'm so nervous, but I'm actually quite relaxed. And then pee my pants. But I wasn't prepared at all. It didn't work. I explained to the audience what I had been trying to do. That got maybe a chuckle. Yeah. But I bombed. But Mike saw the act and was kind of like, I think he's funny. Like, I know that didn't work, but like, he's funny, I think, and invited me a few months later to audition for the sketch show, which I went to the first like table read of a bunch of the sketches after I auditioned, and it was like, it just was like, it was genuinely this moment in my life where I was like, this this feels right. Like this feels like what I should be doing.
So you still managed to parlay a terrible first stand-up experience into a career connection that persists to this day.
Yeah, for sure.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's like, and that's the thing with like people get very scared about stand-up. I get that. I mean, I bombed, but I think I also was sort of comfortable on stage, and that's such a huge part of doing stand-up is like feeling and seeming comfortable. The audience, you can be unfunny as long as the audience feels like they're not nervous for you.
Like you're doing at least.
Yeah, that's the most difficult thing.
Some people might have perceived it as like brilliant Norm Macdonald-esque anti-comedy when you're up there just like, I popped a balloon.
Yeah.
Do real well in Los Feliz today.
Yeah.
I don't know about Georgetown 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, awesome. If you want to tell everyone out there, go see Adult Beginners and whatever else you want to pitch right now.
Sure. Go see Adult Beginners. It comes out April 24th in theaters, on iTunes and video on demand. It's going to be, and also I'm going to be going to, premieres in LA today. I'm going to Nashville to screen the movie Thursday the 16th. I'll be in New York for the premiere next week, but then I go the 22nd to do a Q&A and screening in Chicago. I do the 23rd. I'm going to be in Boston, do a screening and Q&A. I'll be back in New York at the Angelica to do a screening on the 24th. I fly back to LA on the 25th and 26th. I'll be doing screenings and Q&As. The 26th, 27th, I go to Seattle for a screening and Q&A. Portland on the 28th, and San Francisco on the 29th. So if you're in any of those cities, come and the publicist who has been working with me, Liza, is clapping for me that I managed to get
that was
right.
Impressive.
So, but I'll be in all those cities to do screenings and Q&A. So look on adultbeginners.com or our Facebook page, and you'll be able to see if you're in a city close to it. Also, there'll be a list of all the theaters where the movie is. You can type your zip code in to find out if there's a theater near you. But also, if you're not or you don't want to go, you'll be able to buy the movie on iTunes or video on demand. It's all the same day, April 24th.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's great having you.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this episode. We had a lot of fun filming it, and
Lovely
Nick Kroll
man.
is an awesome dude. But this episode was brought to you by DraftKings, where you don't have to wait till the end of the season to claim victory, because you can win huge cash prizes every day.
Hurry to DraftKings.com now and use promo code INSIDE to play for free and get a chance to win part of the $300 million being awarded this season at DraftKings.com.